Being a park ranger in Deep Woods National Park comes with its share of challenges. The park, sprawling across hundreds of miles, is a beautiful yet unforgiving place. Towering trees stretch so high they blot out the sky, and the air is heavy with the scent of damp earth and moss. Visitors come for the solitude, the untouched wilderness, and sometimes the thrill of being somewhere that feels utterly remote. For me, the park was home, a sanctuary where I spent most of my days ensuring hikers stayed safe and nature remained undisturbed. But even after 10 years, there were areas of the forest I avoided. Local legends spoke of strange disappearances, unexplainable sightings, and shadows that didn't belong. I never gave those stories much thought. Superstition and isolation often go hand in hand, I told myself. But when I got the call about Michael Carter, the missing hiker, something in the pit of my stomach told me this time would be different. Michael had been hiking alone near Hollow Creek, one of the most remote areas of the park. He was supposed to return 2 days ago but never showed up. His family reported him missing, and as the ranger closest to the area, it was my job to find him. I wasn't particularly worried at first. Hikers get lost all the time, underestimating how quickly the terrain can become disorienting. I figured I'd find him tired and embarrassed, grateful to be led back to safety. As I drove toward the Hollow Creek trailhead, though, a sense of unease crept over me. The stories about this part of the park whispered in the back of my mind tales of strange creatures seen between the trees, hikers vanishing without a trace, and most famously, the legend of Bigfoot. The rumors surrounding Bigfoot were almost a running joke among the rangers. Tourists loved asking about it, and we'd usually indulge them with a smile and a few vague anecdotes. But deep down, I think all of us had moments where we wondered if there was more to it than myth. There were too many unexplainable events, unusual footprints, strange howls in the night, and sightings of something large moving just beyond the edge of a flashlight beam. As I pulled into the parking area, the woods loomed before me, dense and dark despite the mid-morning sun. I grabbed my gear, radioed dispatch to let them know I was starting the search, and headed down the trail. The first hour of the hike was uneventful. The trail was well worn, and the forest, though quiet, felt familiar. I followed the path toward Hollow Creek, calling out Michael's name every few minutes. My voice echoed briefly before being swallowed by the trees. The deeper I went, the more the forest seemed to change. The light dimmed, filtered through the thick canopy overhead, and the air grew cooler. The usual sounds of birds and rustling leaves faded, replaced by an oppressive silence that made every step seem louder than it should have been. About 2 miles in, I found the first sign of Michael, a water bottle lying in the dirt beside the trail. The plastic was scuffed, as though it had been dropped in a hurry. I picked it up and called out again, but there was no response. A little further on, I found another clue. A scrap of fabric caught on a low-hanging branch. It looked like part of a jacket, torn and frayed at the edges. My gut told me something wasn't right. These weren't the usual signs of a hiker simply losing their way. Then I found the footprints. At first, I thought they were Michael's boot prints pressed into the soft earth, heading deeper into the forest. But next to them, partially overlapping, was something else. They were massive, easily twice the size of my own boots, with a distinct shape that sent a chill down my spine. The toes were splayed, each one ending in a sharp point like claws. I crouched down to get a closer look, my mind racing through possibilities. A bear, maybe? But bears don't walk like this, and these prints were too clean, too deliberate. I radioed the station to report what I'd found, though I kept the details vague. Something about the tracks felt wrong, like a secret I wasn't meant to uncover. I followed the trail cautiously, my senses heightened. The forest seemed darker now, the trees pressing closer together as though trying to hide something. The silence was absolute, broken only by the occasional snap of a branch or the rustle of leaves in the wind. Every now and then I thought I saw movement in my peripheral vision, a flicker of shadow, a branch swaying unnaturally. But when I turned, there was nothing there. The sun was dipping low on the horizon by the time I reached Hollow Creek. The narrow stream cut through the forest like a silver thread, its surface shimmering faintly in the fading light. I stopped to rest, crouching by the water's edge to refill my canteen. The forest around me was still unnervingly quiet, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. As I stood, the faint sound of snapping branches reached my ears. It was distant at first, but it grew louder, accompanied by the distinct rhythm of heavy footsteps. My heart began to race as I scanned the trees, searching for the source. And then I saw it, It was only a glimpse, something massive moving between the trees about 50 yards away. The figure was shrouded in shadow, its form obscured by the dense undergrowth, but its size was unmistakable. It was tall, at least 7 feet, with broad shoulders and long, powerful limbs. My rational mind tried to make sense of it. A bear standing on its hind legs? A trick of the light. But deep down I knew better. The creature stopped, partially hidden by the trees, and turned its head toward me. My breath caught in my throat as I saw its eyes large, reflective, and filled with a strange intelligence. It stood there for a moment, watching me, before stepping back into the shadows and disappearing from view. I stood frozen, my mind racing. I didn't know whether to run, hide, or follow. The logical part of me wanted to retreat, to head back to the station and forget what I'd seen. But another part of me, driven by curiosity or perhaps sheer recklessness, urged me to keep going. If this was the creature the legends spoke of, then Michael's disappearance might not have been an accident. I stayed frozen by the creek for what felt like hours, my heart hammering in my chest. The creature had vanished into the trees, leaving only the faintest rustle of disturbed branches in its wake. Part of me wanted to turn back, to radio the station and call for backup. But I knew the nearest team was miles away and time was running out. If Michael was out here, if he was alive, I couldn't leave him to face whatever was stalking these woods alone. I forced myself to move, stepping carefully along the creek bed as I followed the faint trail of footprints. They were clearer now, pressed into the soft mud near the water. The massive prints alternated with Michael's smaller boot marks, confirming what I had dreaded. He wasn't running from the creature, he was being followed. The forest seemed to close in around me as I moved deeper into the hollow. The air grew colder, biting against my exposed skin, and a strange smell began to fill the air, musky and sour, like wet fur mixed with decay. It clung to the back of my throat, making it hard to breathe. The trees, tall and ancient, cast long shadows that seemed to shift with every step I took. The trail led me to a small clearing, ringed by jagged rocks and overgrown with moss. In the center lay a torn backpack, its contents scattered across the ground. I approached cautiously, my hand resting on the handle of the hunting knife strapped to my belt. The backpack was Michael's. His name was scrawled in faded ink on one of the straps, and a few of his belongings, a water bottle, a flashlight, a crumpled map lay nearby. But it was the ground that caught my attention. Deep claw marks scored the earth around the backpack, each groove several inches deep. Whatever had made them was massive, its strength enough to tear through the soil like paper. My stomach churned as I noticed tufts of dark fur caught on a nearby branch, the strands coarse and thick. I reached out to touch one, and a shiver ran down my spine. It was damp, as though freshly shed. A low growl broke the silence, vibrating through the clearing like distant thunder. I froze, every instinct screaming at me to stay still. The sound came again, louder this time, and closer. I turned slowly, my eyes scanning the tree line. That's when I saw it. The creature stepped into the clearing, its massive frame shrouded in shadow. It stood upright, its shoulders broad and hunched, with long arms that ended in claws sharp enough to glint in the fading light. Its fur was dark, almost black, and matted in places with what I could only assume was dried blood. But it was the face that paralyzed me, a grotesque mix of human and animal, with a snout-like jaw filled with jagged teeth and eyes that burned with intelligence and rage. For a moment neither of us moved. The creature stared at me, its chest rising and falling with deep, guttural breaths. It didn't snarl or charge. It simply watched, its head tilting slightly as though trying to decide what to do with me. My hand tightened around the handle of my knife, though I knew it would do little good. If this thing wanted to kill me, there wasn't much I could do to stop it. The standoff lasted only seconds, though it felt like an eternity. The creature let out a deafening roar, its voice echoing through the trees and sending a flock of birds scattering into the sky. My instincts took over, and I ran. I sprinted toward the tree line, my boots slipping on the uneven ground as I pushed through branches and undergrowth. Behind me, the creature gave chase, its footsteps heavy and unrelenting. The ground shook with each impact, and I could hear the snap of branches as it barreled through the forest. My lungs burned and every breath felt like fire, but I couldn't stop. Stopping meant death. The forest blurred around me as I ran, the shadows twisting and warping in my peripheral vision. I could feel the creature's presence behind me, a crushing weight that grew closer with every step. My mind raced, searching for a plan, an escape route, anything that would give me an edge. Then I spotted it, a narrow ravine cutting through the forest ahead. I veered toward the ravine, hoping the steep walls and rocky terrain would slow the creature down. As I reached the edge, I didn't hesitate. I jumped, landing hard on the rocky slope and tumbling down in a flurry of dirt and debris. Pain shot through my body as I hit the bottom, but adrenaline kept me moving. I scrambled to my feet and ducked behind a large boulder, pressing myself against the cold stone as I tried to catch my breath. The creature's growls filled the air, growing louder as it approached the ravine. I peeked around the edge of the boulder and saw its massive silhouette at the top of the slope. It hesitated, its glowing eyes scanning the ravine below. For a brief moment I thought it might turn back, but then it leapt, landing with a heavy thud that shook the ground. I ran again, weaving between the rocks as the creature pursued me. Its movements were impossibly fast for something so large, and I could feel the heat of its breath on the back of my neck. Desperation fueled me as I grabbed a loose branch from the ground and swung it wildly behind me. The makeshift weapon connected with the creature's arm, but it barely flinched. My escape seemed hopeless until I noticed an opening in the ravine wall, a narrow cave barely visible in the dim light. I dove inside, my shoulders scraping against the jagged rock as I squeezed through the entrance. The creature roared in frustration, its claws scraping against the stone as it tried to follow. The tunnel was too small for it to fit, but I knew it wouldn't give up so easily. Inside, the air was damp and cold, carrying the faint smell of decay. I turned on my flashlight, its beam illuminating the narrow walls and revealing claw marks etched into the rock. As I moved deeper into the cave, my foot struck something soft. I looked down and felt my stomach drop. It was Michael. His body lay crumpled against the wall, his clothes torn and bloodied. His face was frozen in a look of terror, his eyes wide and unseeing. Deep gashes ran across his torso, and the ground around him was stained dark with blood. I knelt beside him, my hands trembling as I checked for any sign of life, but it was too late. He was gone. For a moment I couldn't move. My knees felt weak, and my breath came in shallow gasps as I stared at Michael's lifeless body. The cold, damp air of the cave seemed to press down on me, heavy with the stench of blood and decay. The realization that I had found him too late to save him hit me like a blow to the chest. I clenched my fists, anger and fear surging through me in equal measure. I had failed him, but worse than that, I knew I was next. The low growl outside the cave snapped me back to reality. The creature was still there, pacing just beyond the entrance, its claws scraping against the stone with a sound that set my teeth on edge. It let out a snarl, its frustration evident as it tried to force its massive frame into the narrow opening. The sound of its heavy breathing echoed through the tunnel, each exhale carrying a menacing undertone that made my skin crawl. I scanned the cave, desperately searching for anything I could use as a weapon or escape route. The narrow tunnel stretched deeper into the earth, twisting out of sight. The walls were jagged, marked with deep gouges that told me the creature had been here before. This wasn't just a random hiding spot. It was its territory. I grabbed Michael's flashlight, grateful that it still worked, and forced myself to move. Every step felt like a betrayal, leaving his body behind. But I knew staying meant certain death. I ventured deeper into the cave, the narrow passageway forcing me to stoop as I navigated its uneven floor. The creature roared again, and the sound reverberated through the rock, making me flinch. It wasn't giving up. The tunnel opened into a larger chamber, its ceiling arching high above me. My flashlight revealed a grim tableau, bones scattered across the floor, some animal, others unmistakably human. The air was colder here, and the metallic tang of blood was stronger, nearly making me gag. This was more than a lair, it was a graveyard. Among the bones I noticed something unusual, crude markings etched into the walls. They resembled symbols or patterns, their meaning lost to time, but they exuded an unsettling energy. My mind raced as I tried to make sense of them. Were they warnings, rituals, evidence of something more intelligent and deliberate than a mere beast? The thought sent a shiver down my spine. The sound of scraping claws pulled my attention back to the entrance. The creature was trying to force its way in, its growls echoing louder as its massive frame scraped against the stone. I could see its glowing eyes now, reflecting the beam of my flashlight like twin orbs of fire. It wasn't just hunting, it was angry. I backed away, the beam of my flashlight sweeping across the chamber. That's when I saw it. A narrow crack in the far wall, barely wide enough to squeeze through. It wasn't much, but it was my only chance. I scrambled toward it, my boots crunching over the scattered bones, and slipped inside just as the creature burst into the chamber. I pressed myself against the cold stone, my heart pounding as I watched the creature enter the room. Its massive shoulders nearly brushed the walls, and its claws clicked against the floor with each deliberate step. It sniffed the air, its movements slow and methodical, as though savoring the hunt. The crack in the wall offered a temporary reprieve, but it wasn't enough. The creature's senses were too sharp, and it would find me eventually. My mind raced as I tried to formulate a plan. My flare gun was still in my pack, though it only had one shot left. I'd been saving it as a last resort, and now, I realized, that moment had come. I slid the flare gun out carefully, my hands trembling as I loaded the single round. The creature moved closer, its massive frame blotting out the light as it sniffed the air near my hiding spot. My pulse thundered in my ears and every instinct screamed at me to run, but I held my ground. When the creature's head dipped low, peering into the crack, I fired. The flare exploded in a blinding burst of red light, the roar of the gunshot deafening in the confined space. The creature reared back, letting out a furious scream as the light seared its eyes. Its massive claws raked at the air, its movements wild and disoriented. I took the opportunity to slip out of the crack, running toward the chamber's exit as the beast thrashed behind me. The tunnel twisted and turned, its walls narrowing in places and forcing me to crawl. The growls and crashes behind me grew fainter, but I knew the creature wouldn't stop. It was a relentless predator, and I had invaded its domain. When I finally emerged from the tunnel, the cool night air hit my face like a blessing. The forest stretched before me, bathed in the pale light of the moon. For a moment, I allowed myself to hope that I had escaped, that the creature wouldn't follow me out of its lair. But then I heard it. The low, guttural growl echoed from the cave's entrance, followed by the sound of heavy footsteps. The creature was coming. I ran, my legs burning as I pushed myself to move faster than I ever thought possible. The trees blurred around me, the forest a maze of shadows and noise. Ahead, I saw the faint glimmer of a trail marker. Relief flooded through me as I realized I was close to the main path. If I could just make it to the ranger station, I'd be safe. The thought spurred me forward, though the sound of the creature's pursuit never wavered. When I reached the trailhead, I turned and saw the creature standing at the edge of the forest. It didn't cross the boundary, its glowing eyes watching me with an intensity that sent chills down my spine. It let out one final roar before retreating into the darkness, its massive frame swallowed by the trees. I stumbled into the station just as dawn broke, collapsing onto the floor as the adrenaline finally left my body. My hands trembled as I fumbled for the radio, reporting Michael's death as a bear attack. It wasn't the truth, but I knew no one would believe what I'd seen. The memory of that night haunts me still. The creature's eyes, its growls, the symbols in its lair, they've become a permanent fixture in my nightmares. I resigned from my post shortly afterward, unable to return to the forest that had once felt like home. Even now, far from deep woods, I can't escape the feeling that I'm being watched. Shadows move where they shouldn't, and sometimes, late at night, I hear faint growls in the distance. The forest doesn't forget, and neither does the creature.